Hi everybody, it's Deedee here from stampinwithdeedee.com. One of the many fun ways you can use your stamps is to create little scenes like the one on this card. This is a wonderful way to really bring your creative visions to life. Whatever you can imagine, you can make just by combining the right stamps. But there's something important to keep in mind when stamping scenes like this. If you want them to look realistic, you need to do a little more than just stamp one image on top of another. Take a closer look at this little scene. Notice how the cabin appears to be sitting on the shoreline with a little bit of hillside behind it and some trees behind the hills. What about this scene clues you into where each object sits in relation to the ones around it? The answer is simple. Although you can see all parts of the little red cabin, everything that appears to be under or behind it is obscured a little bit. You can't see all of the lakeshore because the cabin is sitting on it. Likewise, you can't see all of the hillside or all of the trees because parts of them are hidden under or behind another part of the scene. This is how it is in real life. So to stamp realistic looking scenes, you need to replicate that effect. The easiest way to do this is with a stamping technique called masking. In this video, I'll show you how to do it as we make this simple landscape scene and card. For this technique and card, we'll be using the Waterfront stamp set by Stampin' Up. It includes several different shapes and landscape elements in a really fun watercolor style that are perfect for creating scenes. So here are the supplies you'll need to make this card. Your Waterfront stamp set and matching clear blocks, ink pads in Island Indigo, Tranquil Tide, Cherry Cobbler, and soft Suede, some large post-it notes or masking paper, and your paper snip scissors. You'll also need a few papers and the measurements shown here, which I've also included in the video description. To make the sentiment piece, you'll need your 3/4 and 1-inch circle punches plus a little linen thread. Don't forget some adhesive to put the card together, including your snail tape runner, some Stampin' dimensionals, and mini glue dots. Finally, if you want to die cut your scene before attaching it to your card, you'll need your Big Shot or other die cutting machine, plus a shaped die that's big enough for the image piece. Now let's get started. When stamping a scene like this one, where some parts appear to be under or behind others, start by stamping whichever image you want to appear frontmost in the scene. On this card, that's the little red cabin, so we'll stamp that image first and then do some masking to create the rest of the scene. Ink up your cabin stamp with your Cherry Cobbler ink pad and then stamp it in the center of your image piece cardstock. This will give you enough room to build the rest of the scene around the little cabin. Next, you need to make a mask that you can stick to the cabin image to cover it while you stamp the other images. I'm using masking paper for this that I found online because it's tacky on one side, but you could also use post-it notes or thin scratch paper with some low tack tape. To make the mask, just stamp the cabin again on your masking paper. You don't even need to re-ink your stamp to do this. Next, use your scissors to cut the cabin image out of your masking paper. You're going to want to fussy cut this one so there's no white space left around the image. Also, for successful masking, it's really important to cut right on or just inside the lines of the image. Stick the mask to the cabin on your cardstock, and then you're ready to stamp the next part of the scene. Next, ink up the long land strip piece stamp with your soft suede ink pad. We'll use the same piece to create the lakefront and the hillside behind it. Center the stamp about halfway down the cabin image and then stamp it once on your cardstock. The mask protects the ink from getting on your cabin image so that when we pull the mask away, it will create the illusion that the cabin is sitting on the lakefront. Now, without re-inking your stamp, go ahead and position it over the cabin just a little bit above the top of the lakefront and stamp it again. This is called a second generation stamp, and it just creates a paler version of the same image. Next, we need to create masks to cover up those two strips of land. So grab your masking paper or post-its again, and then stamp that image twice on the paper. I'm doing this again without re-inking the stamp because I'm not worried about these images looking perfect. Now, just like you did with the cabin mask, you want to go ahead and fussy cut these images out. Remember to cut along the edges of the images or just inside them. This really will give you the best effect when you're masking with stamps. Now attach your masks to the cardstock right over the strips of land. It doesn't matter what order you lay them down in. Next, ink up the lake or water stamp with your Island Indigo ink pad, and then stamp it so it just overlaps the bottom of the shorefront land piece. This will bring that clear area of the stamp a little closer to the shore and make it look like you have some white caps close in. After you stamp the water, grab your Tranquil Tide ink pad and use it to ink up the tree stamp. Now stamp this image once on your cardstock to the left of the cabin. You want the tree trunks to fall down onto the land a little bit so that they'll look like they're hidden behind the hillside, and the rightmost branches of those trees to fall behind the cabin. Go ahead and re-ink this stamp a second time, and this time you're going to stamp it to the right of the cabin, again with those tree trunks falling down on the mask covering the hillside. Now here's where you get to see how cool this masking technique really is. Just peel those masks right off of your cardstock. If you use masking paper, post-it notes, or scratch paper with low tack tape, this should come off pretty easily. And there you go, you've got a nice little scene with all of the images appearing where they should. The land is under and behind the little cabin, and the trees are behind the hills, and you have those nice little white caps on the water close up to the seashore. Once you've made a mask for a stamp or several stamps in a stamp set, you can usually reuse those. So I just tuck my masks right in with my stamps in my case, and then I have them for the next time I need them. Now let's finish up the rest of the card. Ink up the Thanks sentiment in soft suede ink, and then stamp it on a white scrap of cardstock. Then grab your circle punches to punch out the sentiment and to make a mat for it. I'm using the 3/4 inch circle punch for the sentiment since it's so small, and then just the 1 inch punch to punch out the mat. Now if you want to die cut your image piece, go ahead and do that now before we get to assembling the card. I'm using an old Spellbinders die that I've had in my stash for years, so I honestly don't even remember what it's called, but I thought it looked pretty with this scene. With all the pieces stamped and cut, it's time to put this card together. Apply some snail adhesive to the back of your pattern paper, and then attach this piece to the center of the card base. Then add some snail to the Cherry Cobbler cardstock strip and layer it on top of the card right over the pattern paper at about the center line. Attach the image piece to the center of the card right over the top of the Cherry Cobbler strip. Then attach the sentiment to its mat. Now add some Stampin' Dimensionals to the back of the sentiment piece and stick the sentiment piece in the lower right hand corner of the image. Finally, layer a few strands of linen thread together to make a knot, and then trim the ends and use a mini glue dot to stick that to the top of the sentiment piece. Now you have a beautiful finished card, and you know how to use the masking technique to make more scenes and cards like this one. The Stampin' Up! Products that I used in this video are available 24/7 through my online shop and are linked in the description below. If you enjoy this tutorial, please don't forget to click like and subscribe to my channel for more stamping tutorials and inspiration. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below or visit my website at stampinwithdeedee.com for more information. Until next time, happy stamping!